Hey, Brian, we tried doing this before. Of course, it didn't work out. This time, we're going to make sure that it works. How's everything going?
We got it. I'm inside now. My office at my new house is set up now, so the audio's dialed in more. No, it was fun being on your guys' live stream the other day. So yeah, excited to talk about this.
Awesome, awesome. So I wanted to start with a quick question here. You have a video that did really well that I personally liked the idea of. I thought that it made a lot of sense. It's called "Why Being Bitcoin Rich is Different." Can you explain how you navigate
Yeah,
that idea?
yeah. So on my channel and just throughout all the Bitcoiners that I've ever talked to and the way that I've like experienced Bitcoin, Bitcoin is like the number one thing you can do for yourself personally and the number one thing you can do for society as a whole at the same time. And so anytime I'm talking to anyone about Bitcoin, I ping pong back and forth between those two like so fast that it like that's what that video is about. That video is about like having a significant stake, a significant position in Bitcoin is different than the other types of like being rich. And the other reason why, again, why I made that video is because I believe like the best argument against Bitcoin. So the most piercing argument against Bitcoin is that, oh, people that have a lot of Bitcoin will just be a new form of kind of like the corrupt elite that we already have like in the world. Okay. And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that position. I think there's lots of things you can say in defense of that. And that's what that whole video is about. But I do think that that's the most piercing argument against Bitcoin. And I think people that are passionate about Bitcoin and are skilled at sharing about it shouldn't be afraid to kind of acknowledge that argument and explain why like people owning a lot of Bitcoin and being Bitcoin rich don't have access to the same level of kind of like baseline corruption that happens in a in a fiat economy.
Yeah, can you explain why it's different to own Bitcoin compared to, let's say, a ton of cash
Yeah.
or really anything else?
Yeah, because the monetary policy is just known. The monetary policy is known. Holders of the currency, holders of Bitcoin are like they can't affect the monetary policy and they can't benefit from that's mainly what it is. The reason why it's different is because the monetary policy is just known across the same thing for everyone. So it doesn't matter how much you hold, you don't have an outsized impact on the monetary policy. Whereas in a fiat economy, the more fiat that you hold, the more like the top level of fiat holders have an outsized influence on the political structure that then leads to kind of the way the monetary policy gets established.
So are you talking about proof of stake versus proof of work? Like in the legacy system, it's proof of stake where the more you own, the more power you have over the system, where with proof of work, it doesn't matter how much you own. If you put in the work, you can get more.
Kind of. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly. I think that's a powerful analogy. Definitely.
Okay, perfect, perfect. I think I understand that. I think that makes sense. I feel like the legacy system is actually designed based on what you were saying before, the pushback on Bitcoin. I think the legacy system is designed for that. It's designed to keep the wealthy wealthy, keep the poor poor.
Yes. Yes. And when you're saving in fiat, the flip side of that, so when you quote unquote buy into Bitcoin, right? When you buy your first dollar of Bitcoin or when you choose to hold that first 0.01 of Bitcoin, your zero point zero 0.01 kind of like goes up or like accrues value at the same rate that someone holding 21 Bitcoin or 100 Bitcoin or a company that's holding 10,000 Bitcoin. That's not the same in fiat. In fiat, your $10 in your savings account does not accrue interest, does not accrue value at the same people that have hundreds of millions of dollars invested in assets that your $10 doesn't have access to. And so that's what creates the wealth gap in a fiat economy is you have to hold assets so that as the monetary policy expands, your proof of stake, more and more of the fiat value accrues to the assets you hold. Whereas the people that only hold $10, $100, only hold fiat, their share of the fiat network continues to get devalued. Whereas people, the highest end of the fiat holders, their share of the fiat network continues to accrue value. And you're right, in Bitcoin, no, like the way to get Bitcoin is to trade for it or mine it with proof of work. And so there's no way to kind of just accrue it to you without doing anything.
Yeah, I made this graphic that I think kind of explains what you're saying here. Let me zoom in. I'll see if it shows. Oh, there you go. Okay. So what this shows you is, let's say you have a certain amount of money in the system. Let's say you have oh, actually this is better. Let's say you have a certain amount of money in the system. Let's say you have $100 in the system. You own a certain amount of that money. So you own $5. The total system has $100 in it. What the system can do is it can add money to the total supply, and it can make it so that your $5 is worth less
Mhm.
compared to everything. So your $5 went from being 5% in a $100 monetary system versus 1% in a $500 monetary system. So
Yeah.
I think that is that where you're getting at? Is that where
Yeah.
where you're
No,
going? Like
perfect
you're
illustration. Exactly perfect illustration. And that's yeah, that's why being Bitcoin rich is different. And that's why it is such a refreshing take on like monetary policy.
so this would be the Bitcoin system where if you own 5% of the supply, nobody can change that unless you get to do it yourself. You get to sell that
Yes.
Bitcoin, you get to lose that Bitcoin, do whatever you want with it, but it's your choice. Whereas in the fiat system, you have no choice. There's nothing that you can do,
Right.
nothing at all. You're gonna get screwed over no matter what because there's somebody else who can print more money. That's pretty much it.
The
Does that make
gap, yes, in the fiat system, the gap that you have to overcome in order to have influence on the system is so high. It's so incredibly high. Um, and that's what leads me to my next like big idea or whatever. And it's actually really, I'm really glad you wanted to hit it in that order, because then it leads to the question of, okay, well, how much is enough, right? Like a popular topic on YouTube that everyone like, how much is enough, or how much Bitcoin should I have, or like whatever, right? And
Yeah.
so look, then like first off, I would tell people everyone's personal finances are different. And so acknowledging the first concept is actually more important. Like rather
Yeah.
than me saying any number or anyone on YouTube saying any number, understanding that first point of why Bitcoin is fully different than every other form of investment you can have, that's the most important. But then look, like goals are like helpful to have. And so the goal that I've like outlined in a few videos is the concept of 0.21. So 0.21 Bitcoin. And the reason why I like it is because like 0.21 today is about like $17,000. We'll call it 17,000 US dollars. Okay. That's a good chunk of money. That's a great chunk of money. Very valuable, like very good for a lot of different people, lots of different people, right? But that 17,000 doesn't have influence in the old world. It's like, again, it's okay. It's an okay amount, but it doesn't have influence. It doesn't have the ability to really change or move the needle or really like have an outsized impact on someone's life in the way that 0.21 of Bitcoin can. So 0.21, there's only 21 million Bitcoin. Divide that by 0.21, 100 million people could hold a full 0.21. And you divide that by the population of the earth, it's literally the top 1%. So that's what perfectly encompasses that first point, but in number format is the fact that you can trade $17,000 of United States fiat today for being in the top 1% of individual like Bitcoin holders in the world is like that underscores kind of the massive opportunity that Bitcoin presents. And it underscores kind of, I think you quote unquote need a lot less Bitcoin to like have an impact in your life than you kind of think, right? Again, like, cause I read the comments and I hear people say like, that's nothing, like that doesn't matter, like you can't retire on that, like that kind of stuff, right? And that's why I don't use the words retire. Like I don't use the, like outside of having a philosophical discussion on like whatever retirement means, it's not about, it's not about, for me, I don't, the words financial freedom or the words retirement or the words like whatever, I think just mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So that's why I use the word influence. Like, and I think 0.21, I would say is like just a great in your head number that you can wrap your head around that provides the, I would say the lowest lift way to have influence as Bitcoin continues to, you know, kind of dominate discussions and continue to be this like important thing in the world.
I think the real number for how many people can own it, and I know you did the calculation just based on 21 million Bitcoin, 100 million people. I think the real number of people who's going to own 0.21 Bitcoin, I would say even 0.1 Bitcoin, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, those numbers are much, much smaller. Like
Yeah.
there's in total going to, I think they're in total 200 million people who own Bitcoin today, and 90% of the wallets that own Bitcoin have less than 0.01.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. So the number that you gave, 0.21, that's going to have an even bigger impact because
Definitely.
you're probably not going to be part of the top 1%. You're going to be part of the top 0.25,
For sure.
0.05, like a really, you're going to be one out of a very, very small number of people.
Yes. No, and I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So with that being said, you also have some ideas about real
Yeah.
estate.
Yeah. So I have a middle. Yeah, I have a middle point. I want to talk about. I want to talk about Dave Ramsey for a second. Everyone's favorite personal finance guy. But and I think I again I love the order that we're doing this in. So we talked about why being Bitcoin rich is different. We talked about having a stacking goal of 0.21 and talked about having influence in the Bitcoin network. I want to talk about this kind of Dave Ramsey effect, where I think a lot of people that have been saving in Bitcoin for a long time, that the strategy is kind of growing stale a little bit. And then I want to hit real estate. So at risk of sounding like I'm talking out both sides of my mouth, I believe everything we just covered, but I also think that for a large cohort of people, they've been stacking Bitcoin for a long time and have crushed it. Okay. They've crushed it. They've watched Bitcoin YouTube. They were on Bitcoin Twitter. They had their exchange accounts open for years now. They've been stacking. Their family is like would say they are semi in and semi into fully in. And I think that now continue like Dave Ramsey's like baby steps and kind of like how to get out of debt and how to save and how to like do budgeting and how to do all that stuff, I think helps a ton of people. I think helps a super, super ton of people. But I think once you reach a certain level of wealth or influence, or like you have enough things going on, I think sticking too rigidly to kind of his formula and like what his formula represents can kind of actually stagnate your wealth creation. And I wonder if that's happening with Bitcoin. Like a growing kind of concept that I've been developing is just that I wonder if that's happening with Bitcoin, where some people have been stacking for a long time. Like there could be other things in their life that will provide a higher ROI or a higher wealth kind of like building effect than continuing to stick to kind of the baby steps of like get out of debt and like DCA Bitcoin.
What do you mean?
Basically that just I think and where this is coming from is I think I see more and more people sharing kind of like, oh, their DCA doesn't go as far as it used to, right? Your DCA doesn't go as far as you used to. The number of Bitcoin units are stacking up slower. And I think that kind of the cohort of people that stacked hard are now getting increasingly antsy to accomplish like life goals. Like, and I would like not so having a house, having kids, starting a business, kind of like those kind of things. And I just wonder if the common personal finance advice that's out there of the like sell your chairs, sell everything you have, continue to stack Bitcoin. I just not sure that like continues to fit the level of net worth that some people have accomplished and the amount of Bitcoin that they have stacked. And I just wonder if they're almost continuing to DCA from a place of no longer from a place of abundance, but from a place of like they're scared to like do something else.
That's just emotion, right? I mean, buying Bitcoin isn't something that's emotional. I think it's a proven fact that if you buy more Bitcoin, you're going to have more wealth. I feel like a lot of people, they are thinking more about, oh, I want to do something with my money. I want to be a part of the wealth creation rather than maybe starting a business. They want to own stocks. I have a friend who will, no matter what, you can't tell him to own Bitcoin because he likes to be active in the market.
Yeah.
I think that's a feelings kind of thing. I don't think that's a rational. I don't think that's a rational decision to make. Like, let's say if he bought Bitcoin, he'd be making 50-60% returns per year. His stock portfolios may be making 20% per year. over time, that stock portfolio is going to trend to zero in terms of Bitcoin because, of course, it's not growing fast enough. Bitcoin is the hurdle rate. It's like if inflation is 5% and you're making 2%, your portfolio is going to lose 3% per year until it's going to trend to zero forever. Like at one point, it'll be worth $100,000. Let's say at one point it's worth 10 Bitcoin, then it'll be worth point. Then it'll be worth 8 Bitcoin. Then it'll be worth 6 Bitcoin. Then 4, 2, 1,
Yeah.
0.5, 0.25. So it's more about the way that I see it. It's more about being rational with your investing. Where if you can get a higher return, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want a higher return and then just not have to think about it? At a point, you're gonna have
So,
so much Bitcoin that you can just enjoy your life. Like the people who are antsy, I mean, they've been stacking for a while. If they're antsy about spending their Bitcoin, I don't think that's a reason to start buying other
let,
things. The way that I see it, I mean, the way that I see it, everything else is speculative. Bitcoin is the only thing that has actual certainty. With real estate, for example, you don't know what the supply is going to be. With stocks, you don't know if the company is going to issue some random number of shares. You don't know if BlackRock owns 10, 15, 20% and they start dumping all of their shares,
yeah.
right?
Let
All
me
that stuff
frame it.
is, oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think that's totally right. Let me frame it in terms of I like your hurdle rate. I like your hurdle rate thing, and your hurdle rate is a more it's a better accurate descriptor than my term antsy because you're right. That has negative content. Like so, let's frame it in terms of your hurdle rate and your friend. Um, I okay. So agreed that Bitcoin is the hurdle rate. Agreed that Bitcoin is the hurdle rate and the best thing you can do without another opportunity. Right. I think that I think that there's more and more people that have a significant stack of Bitcoin that they've already stacked, that the risk of trying to beat the hurdle rate has now dropped below the upside of continuing their DCA. I think it has flipped to where they have enough of like a long-term stack that now pursuing entrepreneurial activities, whether it's a different form of investing or starting a business or like whatever XYZ is, like the risk of pursuing XYZ other opportunity to in the pursuit of beating the hurdle rate of Bitcoin, the risk of doing that has dropped below the benefit of continuing their DCA. And that's the hurdle that a lot of even no coiners, so it's from both sides. And this is where this observation's been coming from. So that's the inside Bitcoin one, right? The outside Bitcoin one, the reason why a lot of stock investors and a lot of real estate investors and a lot of kind of business owners just won't look at Bitcoin, just don't want to, is because they don't believe that their opportunity is not beating the hurdle rate of Bitcoin.
Oh, they believe that they're doing better than Bitcoin.
Yes. I mean, inherently, like that's fundamentally what they believe, right? Like if we just non-emotionally take their answer, and this is, remember, okay, so the first time we recorded, like I was telling you a story, and I think this applies here. Like, so I used to live in Orange County, like very affluent, like county, Southern California, and I would have a lot of just a lot of friends that I would talk about Bitcoin to, and there was almost like as Bitcoin started to do pretty well, I wouldn't receive like let me learn more about it. I would almost receive like a very like metaphorical like pat on the head, like good job, Brian, like you have money now, like we have money too. Like it was almost like that kind of thing of like where my outsized bet had like risen me to being peers with them more than the past, which is good. But there wasn't like because Brian was right, my way of stacking wealth didn't beat that way, right? Like there was that's not a thing. And I think the more that I've like grown up and kind of watched the way that Bitcoin adoption has happened and talked to just more different types of people, that's what they're inherently saying. Like they're inherently saying that my way of investing or my way of entrepreneurial thing is already beating the hurdle rate of what you're doing. And back to again where we started the whole conversation, they don't value the emotional payoff of like fix the money, fix the world. And for me, it's like I loved both. Like what kept me stacking so hard for so long was that I loved both. The idea that I'm politically influencing the world and getting rich at the same time was a very like that's super, super powerful.
But why does it matter why does it matter whether other people value your investment decision? Like keep in mind, okay, so when I've spoken to my uncles in the past, and they've literally told me that I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They've told me no. I was talking to one of my uncles at when Bitcoin was at around 18, 20K, told him that Bitcoin is going to 100K by the end of 20. I told him by the end of 2024, and it happened. I told him this
Yep.
in maybe I didn't know. It was a complete guess. I'm not saying that I'm some kind of oracle or something like that,
Yeah.
but this was in like 2022. So I told him uh, Bitcoin is going to 100K at some point 2024, 2025, and it happened. I got lucky, but I mean, it was going to happen. It was inevitable. That uncle still hasn't stacked Bitcoin. I don't care about his validation. He's a real estate investor. He's
Yep.
making way less on his real estate than I am on my Bitcoin. I know for a fact that, let's say, if nothing happens to him, if he's healthy, he's good. I know for a fact at some point he's going to own Bitcoin. So I don't personally care if he's giving me validation.
Yeah.
I have my own validation. So why would I care about what he thinks? I mean, that's what doesn't make any sense to me. I get what
I
you're
think
saying where
that's
you have the influence in the legacy system if you own, let's say, a real estate property. In the last one you mentioned, people don't
yeah.
really see Bitcoin as a serious investment, so they respect you if you have real estate. But I mean, I don't care. If somebody doesn't
Yeah.
respect me, I mean, who cares, right? To me, it's more
Yeah.
like to me, Bitcoin is more like it's a savings account. It's literally a savings account. If I have more fiat, I'm going to buy Bitcoin. If I have less, if I need more fiat, I'm going to sell some Bitcoin. I don't really care about the, oh, borrow against your Bitcoin because that adds a lot of risk to your portfolio.
Yeah.
I don't care about the, oh, don't sell your Bitcoin. I get where that's coming from. I would personally rather create more value over selling my Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, I don't care what other people think, right? To me, it's more about building wealth for myself, building wealth for my family. If they don't agree with me, that's on them.
100%. I think so. I agree with that. And I agree with that about needing having internal validation versus external validation. I think what it highlights for me is I have what different than the past. I think I have more empathy for the other position. Like I have more empathy for the position that they believe they are beating the hurdle rate of Bitcoin. Like, so two things, back to kind of the thing in Bitcoin. I do believe that more and more people have stacked enough Bitcoin to where the risk of pursuing a different entrepreneurial activity to beat the hurdle rate has fallen below the upside of continuing to DCA. So I do believe that inside Bitcoin. And then what that also results in is the opportunity on the outside is that I do believe that there are entrepreneurs like I have empathy for their position that they believe they're beating the hurdle rate of Bitcoin.
I think the way that they see it, I think the way that most people see it, I don't think they see that they are beating the hurdle rate of Bitcoin. I think they don't even think Bitcoin is something real. I think they think Bitcoin is just irrelevant. Like when you tell people, oh, this rental property's value is going to trend to zero, it's going to fall to its maintenance, or it's going to fall to its utility value in terms of Bitcoin, they don't care because what they want is US dollars. They believe that the US dollar is going to be around forever. That's at least the conversation that I have. I have multiple I'm always on Twitter just
Yeah.
destroying real estate
No,
at
and
least
that's
once,
and that's what
right?
and that's what I was saying is back to the part of like the kicker of like replacing fiat money doesn't exist for them. Like
Yeah,
the pseudo political action of investing in real estate versus investing in Bitcoin versus investing in like whatever the legacy asset is. That kicker doesn't exist for them. You're right, and they're still playing by the old scorecard.
yeah, exactly. So if the way that I see it, I mean, when you buy anything else, if you're buying real estate, if you're buying index funds, you're losing money. You're giving money away.
So yeah, no, in total. And so to my point of like why I believe, okay, so why do I believe so we talked about the no coiner example, but then why do I believe that Bitcoiners should pursue a why do I Bitcoiners that have a big enough stack that a different entrepreneurial activity could provide higher upside than their DCA. The reason why that's important, is because I think that is the like path to orange pilling these people that believe that aren't even participating in acknowledging the hurdle rate or acknowledging like fix the money, fix the world. I think that us Bitcoiners continuing to only DCA, and ignore entrepreneurial activities and ignore trying to beat the hurdle rate of Bitcoin is keeping a ceiling on Bitcoin adoption. Like it's keeping a ceiling on it.
But I think there's a difference there, right? When you're an entrepreneur or when you own some kind of business, when you're trying to create value, in that case, you're creating value. Bitcoin is for value storage, right? Right now, right now, I think we're confusing the creating value with the storing value, right? The way that I see it, real estate as a business. Real estate is a way for you to generate cash flows if that's what you want to do. But the problem is a lot of people are just holding real estate. They're passively investing in real estate. They're buying as much real estate as they can and they don't want to do anything with it. In their
Yeah.
case, I think it would be much smarter for them to go with Bitcoin. But if you're using Bitcoin, if you're using real estate to actually, let's say you're developing properties, that's a business to me. You're making
Yeah.
more properties and you're selling them to the end user. That's a business. That's
Yep.
not a store of value.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference. When you're just owning real estate for the sake of owning it and using it as collateral to borrow more fiat, you're not really
So
I don't think you're helping society, in at least in my opinion. I feel like you're bringing society back because what you're doing is you're buying something that somebody else, the end user, could buy, and you're taking it out of their hands and you're not allowing them to own it, right? There's that difference. So Chris Johnson, not sure if you've seen his videos. I had an interview with him not too long ago. His idea is great. The idea that he has is there's there are two ways to do things. Number one, you make income, then you buy income. So essentially, he's switched his way of thinking to create income and buy Bitcoin. Create income, buy Bitcoin. So
yeah.
creating income is creating value. Buying Bitcoin is storing value. They're
Yeah.
completely different. And I feel like confusing those two doesn't really I feel like confusing those two is actually hurting people's portfolios. And the fact that they've been stacking Bitcoin for so long, and I get it. They don't want to stack Bitcoin anymore. Perfectly fine. They want to, like Peter McCormack. I don't know if you know him, the What Bitcoin Did guy. He
Yeah.
started a coffee shop. I guarantee
Yeah.
you he's not making as much money as he would make on Bitcoin. But the entrepreneurial side of things, that's different. I think the entrepreneurial side of things is more about fulfillment. It's more about creating value and adding it to the world. Who knows? Maybe he'll make more money over time. Maybe he'll be able to turn that into a franchise, right? But you
Yeah.
can't, I don't think you can really I don't think that you should forego storing value in Bitcoin for buying real estate properties as a store of value.
Super well framed. I think that was all super well framed. So before we jump to real estate, I really want to land this point of and the Peter McCormack is a great example. That example, the thing about storing value versus buying income and creating value. I think that this is this middle point. I think a lot of people are addicted to DCAing Bitcoin, and they're coming at it now from a standpoint of scarcity and fear when they could go and do and create value. Like I think they're buying Bitcoin to store value and to watch number go up when they could be dedicating, when they've already done that. They've already done that for a long time, a lot of years. And now they could go and do that next step. Yeah, I think there's a lot of Bitcoiners that have hit that point. And I don't think the Bitcoin personal finance advice is like catching up to that. And now we can have the conversation then of like whether real estate's a legitimate business or not or whatever. But yeah, that middle point of the like, there is just classically like there is something else they could be doing better than DCAing Bitcoin.
But then Bitcoin would give them the best return. So let's say, for example, I get what you're saying. I'm not arguing with your point.
Yeah.
So let's say, for example, you work a job, you do this job for 10, 15, 20 years. You start hating it at some point, but you continue doing it just to buy Bitcoin. I think that's what you're referring to. Instead of, let's say, quitting the job, stopping your DCA and starting a business, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I get that. My angle, I actually agree with you. People should do that. People should. I did that. I was working a
Yep.
job. I was making a great income, but I
Yep.
left it, and not specifically for Bitcoin, but to start an entrepreneur, to become an entrepreneur, to start a business, right? So
Yep.
I agree with that. My problem isn't with people starting businesses. The the thing that I don't like
Yeah.
is, instead of putting your value into Bitcoin to store it, buying, let's say, real estate, or
Yeah.
buying
Yes.
stocks like index funds, because
So
index funds are going to give you a 10% return. Real estate's going to give you maybe a 20% return at most, at maximum.
yep.
If you use leverage and you do all that stuff, it's going to give you all
Yep.
the headache. But real estate is not a store of value. People are using real estate as a store of value. Even
Yeah.
stocks, people are using as a store of value, even though they're not supposed to be. Stocks are supposed to be something where you're taking risk. You're trying to multiply your money with stocks. With entrepreneurship, sorry, you're trying to create money. With Bitcoin,
Yes.
you're just holding it. So I think the
Yeah.
issue here is that people don't see that there's way more risk in owning stocks and real estate than there is in owning Bitcoin.
Absolutely. And that's a failure of Bitcoin influencers. That's a failure of Bitcoin influencers and a failure of Bitcoin personal finance. I think, and that's what I'm highlighting. That's what can transition into the whole real estate thing. The reason why, like, figured this out the other day. Like, real estate influencers will just stare you in the face and come on your podcast and be like, you will experience financial freedom. Like, you can leave your job. Like, they will just stare you in the face and tell you that, and they'll talk about all about the bullet points of the tax savings and the blah blah blah, passive, all this stuff, right? Whereas a Bitcoin influencer just stares at you, and I'm hyper generalizing, but they'll just say, sell all your shares, buy Bitcoin, wait for it to go up, like never sell, and yeah, never sell, like, and just all like they don't, and they'll just be like, yeah, this is a hurdle rate, and all your other shit is going to zero measured in Bitcoin. Like, they'll just sit and like, no wonder that message isn't, like, there needs to be 10 times more Peter McCormick starting coffee shops in order for Bitcoin to reach parity with competing with real estate. We need thousands of ex-Bitcoiners pouring content onto the internet being like, I experienced financial freedom in my life because of Bitcoin. And we don't have that, dude. Everything is just so like blah.
I just don't think we're there yet, right? I don't think we're there yet. Most people haven't. Most people, actually, a lot of the people that I know who started stacking Bitcoin wasn't until, let's say, 2021. Also, back to real estate. The reason why real estate is not a good investment compared to Bitcoin is because it has a lot more risk, right? You're taking counterparty risk. You're doing a lot more work. If your insurance company doesn't pay you, you're kind of screwed there. You have to do you have to do a lot more to actually start your Bitcoin investment or your real estate investment. And then keep in mind that we're only kind of targeting this on people. This is pretty much only targeted at people in North America, right? Not everybody has access to prime real estate. Not everybody has access to stocks. Let's say, for example, I have a friend who who lives in Nigeria. They don't buy. They used to buy real estate as a store of value, but they wouldn't rent it out. They would just buy it as a savings account for themselves, right? Today, they stopped doing that. I mean, well, he stopped doing that. He's buying Bitcoin specifically because his real estate isn't worth the risk, because his real estate isn't giving him the return that he should be getting. So to him, Bitcoin is the hurdle rate because he's put in the time to figure out what Bitcoin is and why he shouldn't own real estate. It's more of a, I think for him, it's more out of necessity than it is for anything else. He can't get the same returns that we can with stocks and real estate here. He can't borrow money to buy real estate. Here in North America, in Canada, and the US, we can borrow money that's created out of nothing to buy real estate. Right. And if that's not the case anymore, I genuinely think that the US dollar is going to collapse at some point. People aren't going to want to hold the US dollar. They're going to want Bitcoin for the value that they create. If that happens, if nobody wants to hold the US dollar, let's say the entire world wants to just adopt Bitcoin, you can't do the same thing with real estate anymore. You can't borrow money to buy real estate. The cap rates are going to have to increase massively because people will have to put in all of their money into buying that property rather than being able to borrow money that can be created out of nothing.
I think that that's all true. And I think you're right that I very much am speaking to that 25 to 55-year-old like in North America. Like absolutely. That's like who I primarily like think about all the time. And that's kind of why the reason why each of the points today like flow really well together is because like dude, right there, like all that stuff you mentioned, it doesn't move the needle for that person that's like that for that no coiner real estate investor in North America. Like it just doesn't move the needle for them. What would
But
move the needle
that's
for
just about
them,
education, right? That's just about learning how Bitcoin
the
works.
education, that's going to move the needle for that person is other counter influencers showing that you can become wealthy in North America and gain influence and status in North America while helping that guy in whatever other country. Like, because right now we're so used to the paradigm of like, yeah, inflation sucks, like, but the system is what it is, da 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 da. Like, there is no, we just have to prove it. Yeah, we have to prove it that actually creating value, funneling that value into Bitcoin creates financial freedom like faster and more effectively than the legacy way of doing it, with the kicker that it also like helps the world. And we're not getting that message like out there enough.
But isn't that just like it, let's say for example, if you have a real estate investor who has 100 properties and they have no Bitcoin, and they want to wait for some real estate or some Bitcoiner to tell them that this is what they did. Isn't that just outsourcing your education? Why not take control of your education and learn for yourself, right? Like learn what the fundamentals of Bitcoin are rather than trying to rely on some random Bitcoin. Because keep in mind, to me, Bitcoin is an escape. At some point, I'm not going to have to work if I don't want to, right? Peter McCormack, I think he wants to work. I think he wants to create businesses. He wants to keep doing what he wants to, but not everybody is willing to do that, right? And the vast majority of people don't see real estate as a business. They see real estate as a store of value. So to them, I don't think they're gonna get what they want out of Bitcoin influencers. I don't think enough Bitcoin influencers are going to be talking about, oh, you should buy real estate after you buy Bitcoin. I don't think that's gonna happen because I mean, if you see the charts, real estate is trending to zero forever. It's going to keep trending to zero. So the value that, let's say for example, if you have a person with 100 I mentioned that person with the 10 Bitcoin portfolio. At some point, if they don't have Bitcoin and they have other if they have other assets, let's say they have a $850,000 portfolio, stocks and real estate. Eventually, that portfolio is going to, today it's worth 10 Bitcoin. Eventually, it's going to be worth 1 Bitcoin. Then it's going to be worth zero point 0.1 Bitcoin. Then it's going to be worth 0.01 Bitcoin. I think the point is that people should be taking the time to learn how Bitcoin works rather than trying to get other people. I mean, people aren't going to, the way that you're saying it, I get what you're saying. People are, people need some kind of influence. They need some kind of authority to have them change their thoughts where they believe this. Let's say Dave Ramsey. Maybe people are waiting for Dave Ramsey to come out and say, "Hey, I bought some Bitcoin." And until he does that, they're not gonna buy. And I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think there's going to be enough people who are moving from real estate to Bitcoin and then back to buying real estate. And those are the people that will probably impact all these other real estate investors' opinions. And I don't think that, I genuinely don't think that's going to happen. I don't think people are going to go back.
I I guess I'm trying to articulate that more about the like relaying the optimistic message of it rather than the like real estate going to zero measured in Bitcoin is not changing their perspective. Like that's not changing their perspective because it's also the whole thing of like kind of this like so what? Like so what? Like what does that Bitcoin represent? Like in that world where one house is zero point zero 0.01 Bitcoin, like what does that world represent in general? Like whether you're holding large stacks of fiat or large stacks of Bitcoin, the whole like what can you buy with it or what's the actual purchasing power of it or whatever, I think is so kind of just out there that in and of itself doesn't really move the needle. Like as far as changing their perspective.
Perspective. Mhm. Yeah, I get what you're saying, but again, I don't think that's up to Bitcoiners, right? I don't think that's up to somebody who, let's say, I don't think I don't think it's up to a Bitcoiner to force somebody who's a real estate investor to study Bitcoin. They're completely different. Like there are a lot of
See,
people who are
so I kind of actually think it is. Like that's what I think
is
I think it's creating a ceiling. That's at the core. That's at like the core of what we're discussing.
yeah.
Us not us taking that position. If that position that you're saying is true, I think there's a ceiling on Bitcoin adoption. But I think it's completely just a competitive bucket of like your value you're creating in the world. Is your value funneling into the old fiat world or the new Bitcoin world? Like the Bitcoin economy has to 10x, like has to 100x. The number of entrepreneurs then has to increase by a lot, like by a lot, in order for us to, it has to just be so obvious that that is the tried and true path to like becoming a millionaire in order to kind of turn the tide. Whereas right now in North America, the overarching way that the majority of people become millionaires is real estate. Like that's just like an obvious baked in thing that has to flip in order for Bitcoin to become the world reserve currency of the world.
It can also just be the current people who are in the legacy finance. Let's say, for example, Walmart. If Walmart starts accepting Bitcoin, how much do you think that's going to change adoption? It doesn't necessarily have to be new entrepreneurs, right? I mean, of course, that goes back to we're concentrating wealth with Walmart. We're concentrating wealth with these massive corporations. It goes back
No,
to
I
that.
like that example. I like that example. And so, okay, so what would it take for Walmart to actually do that? What it would take for Walmart to actually do that is there to be thousands and thousands of more competent middle manager corporate people that invest in Bitcoin. And that's back to the whole thing. And what content are the middle managers like or and high up VPs at Walmart watching? They're watching Experience Financial Freedom through real estate channels. Like that's what they're doing. They're watching influencers that talk about buying real estate, buying rental properties, buying all that stuff. Like because the Bitcoin influencers, their message is not connecting with those kind of like corporate people.
Wouldn't that mean that we're going the opposite way? So instead of people going from real estate to Bitcoin back to real estate, people are going from real estate to Bitcoin. I think that's the way that things will go. I think we're going to see people like, let's say for example, I was talking about Chris Johnson. He has this massive group of people. He has a group called Wealth Squad where he used to talk about real estate and stocks. Now he only talks about Bitcoin. I think that's what's going to change people's opinions. I think it's going to go from people who used to buy real estate as an investment to people who figured out Bitcoin, who put in the time to understand what it is, and they're the ones who change. It's like the authority bias, right? Where
I think you're right. Brian Decker is another example of like
Brian
Brian Decker is another example of a huge loan officer, like talks about the stock market, talks about Bitcoin now.
So
Yes.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's what I think what's going to change. I think that's what's going to change how the world thinks about Bitcoin is not Bitcoiners going back to real estate. It's going to be real estate investors going to Bitcoin. It's going to be stock
It's
investors going to Bitcoin.
it's people being able to talk to both audiences and having authority in both
Yes.
audiences. Like both those guys that we just outlined, like have credibility in both audiences. And that's what I'm talking about with my Orange County example of like, it's not about seeking external validation. It's about having authority in multiple domains. And I think, and there's lots of Bitcoiners that have done a great job at stacking Bitcoin, but have not done a good job at establishing credibility in multiple domains.
Hmm. That makes
There's an
sense.
apathy there. There's a weird underlying apathy that comes out in some Bitcoin content, which is and some Bitcoiners, which is just like buy and wait, buy and wait, buy and wait, and they're not actively trying to establish credibility in multiple domains.
But that's what Bitcoin is, though, right? It's about with Bitcoin. You're not the way that I see it. If you save in Bitcoin over 10 years, you're not going to have to think about money anymore. Let's say if you keep saving in Bitcoin, and if you keep DCAing into Bitcoin for the next 10 years, there's going to be some point. Let's say you DCA into Bitcoin for the next 10 years and then you stop. At some point in your life, you're never going to have to think about money anymore. So those people who, like you said, people stacked Bitcoin, they did a really great job, but they're not influencing other people. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they don't have a reason to. What's their incentive? What are they getting a 50% return for talking to real estate investors and convincing them? Because most real estate investors aren't interested. They just don't want to because they see that the system that they have is working for them. They don't care. Like you can push people to study, but they won't do it for themselves. I think the problem. I think what's going to happen is I get where you're coming from. I think you're coming from it from more of an empathetic point of view where you got to see it from their perspective. You got to understand what they're thinking, but the market doesn't care about that. The market does not care. Like there are people who own Bitcoin already who are continuing to buy Bitcoin. Let's say Michael Saylor, he just bought another 20,000 Bitcoin. You think Michael Saylor is going to care about some random real estate investor who wants to wait for another real estate investor to tell them to buy Bitcoin? By the time
Yes,
they
I
figure it
think,
out,
dude, Michael Saylor went and met with GameStop. That's the
yeah,
same thing. Like that's the same
insane.
thing at that level. It's the
But
same thing at
he,
that level of like, in
yeah,
order for his bet to pay off, other CEOs have to join in, which means he has to have credibility in multiple domains. Like,
I
and
don't.
I think, are there people that are sitting on a bunch of Bitcoin and just like quote unquote letting other people do the work or like whatever? Totally, like absolutely. I think that if that ratio stays too low, again, the adoption it won't happen. Like at some point, it almost becomes a very political like game of chicken on just like what choice are you making? And yes,
Yeah,
the math and the returns and all that stuff is a big part of it. And that's why like holding Bitcoin is like pocket aces or like whatever analogy you want to use. Like it's extremely no, like and there's no loss of like it's an extremely powerful position. Like it's absolutely an extremely powerful position. The broader base of it, it becomes even more powerful and creates the backward effect. And here's another thing, just like people get frustrated with like all the other people that are like at the White House, right? For like the crypto summit or whatever. Like that's what happens when there are enough Bitcoiners or whatever, like playing the influence game. And that like the adoption won't happen in the way that Bitcoin podcasters say that it will if there isn't a more broad-based kind of like appealing message to just to more people.
but again, that appealing message is save in Bitcoin, so your purchasing power increases and your cost of living decreases. And it's for everyone. Anyone can do it. Anyone in the world can accumulate Bitcoin. I get what you're saying. Real estate investors are waiting for other real estate investors to tell them to buy Bitcoin. But again, that's to their own detriment, right? If they're waiting for a real estate investor to buy Bitcoin and tell them to buy Bitcoin, then they're waiting for Bitcoin to go to millions of dollars. Like by the time that happens, by the time we have, let's say, bigger pockets, if bigger pockets starts talking about Bitcoin, I'm expecting Bitcoin to be like $100 million at that point, right? And bigger pockets is one of the biggest influencers in Bitcoin or in real estate. They have some of the most influence, right? I
Yep.
don't think they're going to like. There was a video that they posted where they were talking about the 5 issues with Bitcoin. Nobody's going to use it. It's not physical. It doesn't create cash flow. Those are basic, very, very, very basic issues that they have that we've already talked about, right? If you go on Google and you search why does Bitcoin not have cash flow, they could easily do that Google search. I think it's more about laziness, to be honest. I think even if Dave Ramsey does come out and say, hey, you should buy Bitcoin, a lot of people are still going to question it. They're going to think, oh, he's crazy. Because keep in mind, I used to have, before I started talking about Bitcoin, I had like 50, 60,000 subscribers or followers on Twitter. I had something like 115,000 followers or 110,000 followers on Instagram. After I started talking about Bitcoin, even though I had that massive following, even though I'd been doing it for 2, 3 years, I have my CFA, people still unfollowed me. I think what's going to happen is people are going to be forced into it. They're not going to have a choice. Like today, they don't understand fiat. They're not going to understand Bitcoin. They're going to be using it in the background and they're going to have no idea. I think that's what's going to, I think most people are in for max pain. I think that's what's going to happen. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there's a path to, I think flipping. I don't think there's going to be, I don't think that people will even realize that there's max pain. Like, I
Yeah.
think that because fiat money because the nominal prices of everything are continuing to just like, because the nominal prices of everything doesn't even mean anything, and because humans are so good at rationalizing anything, there's not no, like I don't think there's going to be that like payoff moment. I don't, and I think that's where
Like, what do you mean by payoff moment?
it's like, oh, the quote, like the Bitcoiners were right or whatever.
Oh yeah,
Like I
yeah,
don't,
that's not going to
yeah.
happen. I don't think that's going to happen either. I think people are going to keep saying that Bitcoiners are wrong until one day Bitcoin is just like the way that I see it. Our content is eventually going to be obsolete because everybody's going to be using Bitcoin in the background. They're going to have no idea what they're using, and they're not going to care. Right? The content that we're posting at some point, people aren't going to care about because right now, the people who care about Bitcoin, the people who care about our content are the ones who are DCAing, the people who are actually buying their Bitcoin. At some point, Bitcoin is going to be so widely spread that nobody's going to want like if somebody were to talk to you about um just minor things like this is how tires work, this is how to make tires. Most people don't really care about that because they're using tires no matter what. Actually, maybe tires is not the right example, but even fiat currencies. Most people don't care about how fiat currencies work because they're using fiat currencies on a day-to-day basis. So that content, how fiat currencies work, is almost obsolete. If you get what I'm saying, the people around us, every single person is going to own Bitcoin. They're going to have Bitcoin in the background, and they're not going to care about the moral aspects because we're going to be living it. So we're not going to get that. Oh, Bitcoiners were right. That. I agree with you. I 100% agree with you. People are not going to admit that. They're not going to say Bitcoiners were right. They're going to say something like, "Oh, you got lucky." Like there's this guy. He talks about. I think his name is Money Matters or something on YouTube. He was saying at some point, at one point, owning Bitcoin is stupid, and if it works out, then you got lucky. Like that's his conclusion. He's people like him are so arrogant that they're not going to touch Bitcoin. They're not going to start studying it until it goes to $100 million, until the US government has 5 million Bitcoin, and they're never going to sell again. And these people are the ones fighting for 20 Satoshis, 100 Satoshis, 50 Satoshis. Like at a point, they're back to what you were saying before 0.21 Bitcoin is the key. They're never, ever going to get to that point. The people who get to that point are the ones who are actually studying Bitcoin and putting in time. They're adding value to the Bitcoin network by holding, and they're increasing the value of the block reward. They're doing whatever they can to help the Bitcoin network. The people outside of this network aren't going. I don't think they're going to figure it out. I think they're never going to figure it out. 90% of the world probably will never figure it out.
I think that all of that doesn't. So it sounds really logical, right? Like that sound, and I've been there. I've said all that same stuff before, and I'm not trying to just like nitpick it for the sake of nitpicking.
Of course.
I think that you know how, okay, a rising tide lifts all boats, or like back to the start of it, like why Bitcoin Rich is different. Like,
Yeah.
I think there's a chance, that Bitcoin is so good for the world that even that quote unquote arrogant person that gets the 20 Satoshis in year X, like that the abundance in their life is so high that it like still works out for that person even. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that's where the like pseudo, I'm gonna make like a spiritual analogy, like it just for a sec, like, dude, like this is what's so like heaven, quote unquote heaven, is gonna be so good for everyone. And I'm trying to say this as broad as possible. It's gonna be so good for everyone that your brain on earth can't even comprehend what that means because
Yeah.
our brains on earth are so into like my status first, your status first, whatever. Like, right? And if Bitcoin works, like if fiat money is the biggest drain this in the world, like fiat money is ripping. You hammer this every day, and it's so good and so right. This is what Bitcoiners are so right about: is that how corrupt fiat money is and how much it rips off every single person, rich billionaires, all the way to the person that literally has $1 net worth. Fiat money is ripping off all of those people, and it's like it's making the efficiency of the world terrible. It's causing
Yeah.
us all to be so stressed and all this stuff, right? And so in XYZ year, when Bitcoin is the world reserve currency and influence has been established and whatever, and that person that's the quote unquote last to adopt Bitcoin or like adopts it in the background without knowing it, life is going to be so good for that person compared to how it is today that everyone will be able to rationalize that it was awesome.
Yeah. But I think that comes after we stop using real estate as an investment.
I think that the transition period, this is why I'm so interested in kind of the quote unquote real estate influencers or whatever. Or the gatekeepers, personal finance gatekeepers, personal finance influence. Like, I think that like right now, the president of the United States flipping to be pro Bitcoin, again, just as a sense, like the president of the United States being pro Bitcoin instead of anti Bitcoin is a signal to all the status brokers in the world down the chain. And this, like, as the status brokers flip over, the transition from real estate as the store of value to Bitcoin as the store of value, everyone is going to rationalize along the way that they were the smartest person in the room, the smartest person in the room, the smartest person in the room. There isn't going to be a, like, that's why I don't believe in the message of like real estate's going to zero measure into Bitcoin, because it's no, the nominal prices of everything is going to skyrocket like through the roof, and then Bitcoin is going to become the world reserve currency of the world, and Bitcoin replacing fiat money is a rising tide that lifts all boats and makes the world a better place for everyone. Like, that message has to be 10 times, 1,000 times, million times louder.
But then why wouldn't everything trend to zero in terms of Bitcoin? It's already doing that.
It can, but it just doesn't matter because it doesn't matter. Like, focusing on 21 million hard cap and everything trending to, like, that just creates a weird, like, you know, we talk about unit bias between like one Bitcoin versus one Satoshi. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it matters if it's measured in it. That's why I've almost flipped on this. Like, I'm actually back to where, yes, dollars are a bad like measuring stick, but like I think a different thing to focus on would be like, pretty soon everyone's going to be a millionaire in the United States. Like, everyone is going to be a millionaire in the United States, and the percent like your graph that showed like the percent that you own of the fiat network and how it gets devalued. I would love to see like the amount of I'm a millionaire videos from young people on YouTube has probably gone up. Like, I haven't looked at a graph of that, but like the amount of millennials that are now millionaires is just going up. Like, what does it even mean to be a millionaire? Like, focusing on that instead of focusing on things are going to zero measured in Bitcoin is like, it's just less of a mental leap for people.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I think again, even the people who are becoming millionaires, how are they becoming millionaires? The way that I see it, I mean, they're becoming millionaires because of, again, fake money.
Yeah.
Right? If they weren't able to borrow money to buy real estate, there's tons of people on Twitter who are constantly talking about, oh, buy more real estate, buy more rental properties, buy more stocks, buy do this or do that. I don't know if they really talk about the risk associated with it. People will become millionaires, but what will that $1 million buy when you so back to what you were saying before, where does it really matter if the price of a house trends to zero in terms of Bitcoin? It does, because if you don't adopt Bitcoin, then it's not going to trend to zero for you. It's going to keep going up, right? At a point, a house will cost 1,000,000 Satoshis, but how much will 1,000,000 Satoshis cost? How many hours of your life will that 1,000,000 Satoshis cost? It'll probably be in proportion to what it is today to buy a house. So let's say a house is 5 Bitcoin. How many hours does it cost you to buy 5 Bitcoin? It'll probably be something similar, where the amount of hours it takes you to buy 1,000,000 Satoshis is the same at that point as it is to buy 5 Bitcoin today. So if somebody doesn't adopt Bitcoin, it actually works against them. It actually gets more expensive for them, because to them, their labor is decreasing in terms of Bitcoin, and on top of that, the price of the house is decreasing in terms of Bitcoin. So their labor is being devalued. More and more people are willing to offer the same service as them, and over time, that just makes it so that their value is worth less. The value of
that person that person is going to be at the same spot in both economies. The current fiat economy and the new Bitcoin economy, like their starting point is going to be the same. They're not using the transition to quote unquote climb status or whatever. It's just going to be the same. And that's why
Yeah, they're ignoring it.
for that person, they're not going to experience a loss. They're just going to experience the same. Like the majority of people, and that's why I think the whole entrepreneurial thing is like interesting, because Bitcoiners that have been DCAing, they're taking on the risk. This is why saying that real estate is more risky than Bitcoin, I don't think is, I just don't identify with that. The volatility of Bitcoin is a giant risk. Just because we're now immune to it and a lot of Bitcoiners are immune to it, I think we discount how big of a risk the volatility is, which is why so many people stick with the like slow devaluation of the dollar. Like the slow and steady devaluation of the dollar is less risky to them than taking on the volatility. And so Bitcoiners are taking on the volatility for the outcome of climbing status. And so we're experiencing a quote unquote win. The person in the other place, they're not experiencing a loss. They're experiencing staying the same.
But that's a loss, right? Staying the same is a loss at this.
Only in fiat. Only in fiat,
yeah.
though. But then as the Bitcoin standard comes up from the bottom, they eventually catch the train, as you're saying, in the background, and then they experience life getting better. So no one actually experiences a loss.
Oh, sorry. What did I do there? Oh, there you go. Okay. So you were mentioning the volatility risk of Bitcoin. I don't think volatility is a risk. Volatility is not a risk if you have the right time horizon, right? What this shows you is the 4-year moving average of Bitcoin. So the 1,458 day moving average of Bitcoin. This line shows you that. And it just keeps going up. So what this means is if you hold for 4 years, you're basically eliminating risk. You're getting rid of the risk because the risk comes with the time horizon. The risk comes
Real estate
with,
has the same thing. The stock market has the same thing.
but with stocks, there's no guarantee of the stock market increasing in value. There's no guarantee of that. The stock market could, if baby boomers start dumping, let's say baby boomers want to go into retirement and they want to start paying for their retirement with the proceeds from their stocks, stock market may never come back. Newer generations are figuring out that maybe the stock market isn't the way to go. They don't even have savings. So where's the money to buy the stock market gonna come from?
I mean, yeah, we can say that if we want, but just truly, like the chart of both does the same thing. It's
It
all
does.
up and to the right. All assets are up and to the right.
Yes, agreed. But the Bitcoin has that built-in foundation of the supply limit. It has that built-in foundation of the halving. It has the built-in foundation of a finite supply. With stocks, that's not the case. We don't know. Also, Bitcoin is global. Real estate stocks are not global. If you buy real estate, if you buy stocks, you're taking risk within a certain country. With just that being eliminated, I think that's massive. There's also counterparty risk with stocks. You have to rely on some executive, you have to rely on some person who's making decisions in the background. There's all those risks that are involved with stocks, plus the volatility. Bitcoin doesn't have all of that.
Yeah. It sounds good. Like it sounds good.
Yeah.
I think like what's the point? The point was I'm saying that the risk, like the volatility risk of Bitcoin. I guess the volatility risk of Bitcoin is higher than all encompassing risks of like other assets.
Yeah, the day-to-day moves. Yeah, I get it. I get what you're saying. But that's the thing. The longer you hold, let me actually go back to this. So if you hold Bitcoin for, let's say, this short period of time, it's going to dip and then it's come back up. It's going to dip, it's going to come back up. If you don't quite understand the basics of you have to hold Bitcoin for 4 years, then you're going to get hurt. And I completely agree with that. That's the thing. You have to understand the fundamentals. But it's also
here's
the
what
same,
it is,
right? It's also the same as stocks. Go ahead.
Yes, here's what it is. So that concept of holding for the long term, I think this is what it is. I think the more that I've like grown up, become the concept of holding for the long term isn't just unique to Bitcoin. Like that's unique to investing as a whole. So I've become like, is Bitcoin extremely powerful? Yes, like it absolutely crushes it, extremely powerful. I think its uniqueness, like the reason why the uniqueness doesn't pierce through to a lot of people, like those reasons have become louder for me and more, and I've had more empathy for that. So holding for the long term, like equates to a lot of different people. And then back to this thing of like, whether you were holding stocks or holding real, even like, let's take Bitcoin out of it for a second. Over the last 10 years, if you held stocks or you held real estate, stocks maximalists don't feel like they lost to real estate maximalists. Real estate maximalists don't feel like they lost to stocks maximalists. Like they both believe and rationalize that they are the geniuses in the world floating on top of the fiat money supply, like expanding, right? And so that's happening. And then Bitcoin maximalists, same thing across this whole thing. So as Bitcoin continues to take ground, and as Bitcoin continues to become more and more obvious that it is a replacement for fiat money, I don't think there's going to be losers in the other assets. Even though assets are trending to zero measured in Bitcoin, I don't think there are going to be losers. Like, I think everyone is going to experience nominal prices rising as Bitcoin continues to eat into the US dollar's market share. And eventually, then the Bitcoin creates this floor that increases economic abundance like for everyone in the world.
But I don't get how you wouldn't have losers if the real value of those properties is decreasing, right? If the real value of real estate is decreasing, the real value of stocks is decreasing.
Yeah, because the floor of, I guess, because
like if you look at the
no, because of this. Because okay, a good Bitcoin saying of the like whole everyone gets Bitcoin at the price they deserve, right? Like what does that mean? That means that they get it at the place that it makes sense to them. And so okay, that real estate investor that's holding 100 properties or whatever, they're not listening, and then boom, 7.5 years from now, they listen and convert one property, and then they start DCAing one property a year into Bitcoin then, right?
Yeah.
They're not going to experience like that person that owns 100 properties today, like is their status in the world, their quality of life as nominal prices are rising. Yes, it's dropping in comparison to me because I'm on like, or in comparison to Bitcoiners, because Bitcoiners are experiencing rapid ascension. That person is going to get Bitcoin at the price they deserve and not drop any spots. Just because now the ratio of Bitcoiners that are at their level increases because that many people rode the Bitcoin up, their status is not going to drop because they get Bitcoin at the price they deserve before it drops.
But what about the fact that they could sell their property for 5 Bitcoin today, and at some point they're only going to get 0.01 Bitcoin? There are going to be people who are stubborn enough even then who don't sell because they're going to think that.
Yeah, because that's in retrospect. Like in retrospect, they could have done it earlier and experienced ascension. They're going to rationalize that their risk-adjusted decision of when to do it was still smart and was smart, and they didn't experience a drop in status. Just because they could have gone from being 100 million net worth to being a billionaire or whatever, like whatever measurement, like even though they could have increased status, they're going to rationalize that risk adjusted, they did it at the right time and still experience like they're never going to experience not being wealthy.
I don't know. I don't agree with that. I think at some point there's going to be. I think at some point they're going to lose value because maintaining properties is expensive. And when they could have exchanged their property for, let's say, 5 Bitcoin today, instead they're going to go through the headache of maintaining that property. They're going to go through the headache of having to spend the time, resources, and energy to keep that property. They're going to keep it. I think it's going to get too expensive for them to do that. right? Like at some point,
Yeah, and
let's
then
say,
that's what triggers them to switch over. Yeah, that's what triggers them to switch
right.
over. Yeah.
But then that breaks the system, right? That breaks their wealthy mindset at some point because of the leverage with real estate. You can go from having a plus to having a minus within weeks, within months, right? I think that's the problem. I think a lot of the people, let's say let's say Robert Kiyosaki. I know he has like $1 billion in debt or something like that, something crazy. He could, if the system were to, I don't know how badly the system will collapse. I don't know what exactly will happen. If interest rates can't come down, if inflation keeps going up. Let's say, for example, if Bitcoiners who made money with Bitcoin keep spending their money, they keep spending their wealth, they keep spending their wealth, and they keep pushing prices up. At some point, real estate mortgages aren't going to be at the same rate that they are today. At some point, today you can get a mortgage for 2%, 3%, 4%. At some point, those mortgages are going to go higher and higher because of the hurdle rate with Bitcoin. Instead of lending money to buy houses, why wouldn't the bank lend that money to somebody who's buying Bitcoin and then they give them like a 20% return?
Yeah, I think all of that stuff is possible. I think as all of that's I think you're just describing the transition. I think all of that is just describing the transition. And I
Yeah.
think what I'm more and more what I'm as I think about the transition, I don't think that it's going to be painful for people that are already wealthy today. Like I think they're going to transition to a Bitcoin standard. Like that's the whole thing. So just because I've been DCAing forever, someone who starts their DCA today but is already wealthy in the fiat system today could easily outpace how many Bitcoin I have. Like they could just do that right now today.
Yeah.
Uh,
But
and
they
in a
won't be
certain
able to.
sense, in a certain sense, they skipped all of the like volatility and risk and pain that I experienced. But I had to experience that. The return from myself experiencing that was I experienced rapid ascension, and I have more savings than the average person like my age because I took on the outside risk and like did that right. Them, they took on the outsized risk in the old world of accumulating the old world asset, and
Mhm.
then the light switch is going to flip on and it's going to become politically acceptable or risk adjusted acceptable, or like again making like even making money and protecting money are different skills.
Yeah.
And so eventually eventually the math pans out. I don't think it's going to be a light switch where like I don't think legacy assets are going to get dumped. Legacy assets are not going to get dumped. They're going to get rebalanced, and Bitcoin is going to continue to grab market share, grab market share, grab market share. There isn't going to be a dumping of the legacy assets. I think the transition is going to be, I don't want to use the word orderly, but but I think the transition is going to be more, I don't want to use the word gradual either. I just think like I want to
I think
stick more on the mindset thing of like people aren't going to experience a drop in status. They're going to stay at the wealthy status that they are. They're going to miss out on a chance to take on the increased risks to jump status, but they're going to stay right there. They're going to catch the Bitcoin train and then experience the gradual rise that we've been experiencing.
Okay, but let's look at it this way. You mentioned that you should buy 0.21 Bitcoin to be in the top 1%.
Yeah.
At some point, let's say somebody has a real estate property where it's worth $5 million today, or let's say it's worth $850,000 today, just to make it 10 Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah.
That 10 Bitcoin property, they could sell it, or they could borrow money against it, and they could buy 0.21 Bitcoin. But at some point, they're never, ever, 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 ever going to be able to get to 0.21 Bitcoin. That's going to happen.
Their goal is not to get to 0.21 Bitcoin. That person that's already wealthy, their goal is to maintain their wealth and maintain the status that they have. That's why I
Right.
keep bringing up the Orange County example that I have of like me, I was super pumped that like I'm climbing status, right? And yeah, there's the whole like not needing external validation from other rich people that you're
Yeah.
experiencing. Like absolutely, there's that whole thing. But there's the whole thing of like people that already have status, they're they don't drop status because someone else used the new money way to gain status. They're
Well,
just going to be there.
technically they do, because if their status as being a deca millionaire, or if their status as being um, a millionaire, for example, we know that fiat's going to continue to rise. People who had $1,000, let's say 100 years ago, they were very, very wealthy. People who have $1,000 today are pretty much broke, right? So
Yes.
you may have $850,000 in that property today, but at some point that property's value is going to be, let's say, 1.2 million dollars, and that's fine. You're still going to have $1.2 million, but let's say 50 years from now, what's that $1.2 million going to be worth? It's going to be worth next to nothing.
Yes, but their location in the circle, they're not going to experience a change in position in the circle.
The
Like
circle is going
back
to
to your
change.
slide deck.
I think
Huh?
the circle is going to change. I think the circle is going to change. I think people's thoughts are going to change around what value, what wealth is, right? The status is going to go from people who own, let's say, one property to one Bitcoin. The status is going to go from people who own 10 properties to 10 Bitcoin. The rarer something gets, the more value it has. Like, let's say, okay,
Yes,
so
but that person that experiences what it's like to own 100 houses in the United States,
yeah,
that person their reality is they own 100 houses in the United States.
yeah,
So right now, so Bitcoin is going to continue to take share, take share, take share. They're going to ignore, 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 and then boom, 7 years from now, they're going to flip and begin siphoning off. Their reality is then going to be the person of someone that is DCAing Bitcoin at a high level, still before the people that have 1,000 houses or whatever. And so their position relative to the person with 1,000 houses is going to stay the same because they got Bitcoin at the price they deserved, like at that
no,
level.
their position is going to increase in terms of the person with 1,000 houses, because they're eventually, that person with 1,000 houses won't be able to buy the same amount of Bitcoin that this person with 100 houses was able to buy. So their position is going to increase. Their status is going to increase.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I think there's a stat. Keep in
So
mind,
I guess their status won't drop. I guess that's what I keep saying is that obviously
but it
people
will
that
drop compared to the people who buy Bitcoin first, right? Let's
but
say
that doesn't matter. But we already went in over that, right? Is that your status compared to other people actually doesn't matter because that person has their own internal validation also. So there won't be a loss. Like the real estate people
yes,
aren't sad that the stock market people, whatever, whatever, whatever. Like they're
I
not
see what you're
sad
saying. Yeah.
about that.
Okay, I see what
Everyone
you're
is a maximalist. Everyone is a maximalist and a rationalizer of their own thing, like their own niche that they love.
right. But the I get what you're saying, but I feel like the reality would be like, the at least to me, the reality to me, or to somebody who's stacking Bitcoin, the reality would be that they can buy, let's say, $5,000 worth of Bitcoin today. They could put $5,000 into Bitcoin today, and they can eventually buy a house with that 5,000 Bitcoin, or $5,000 worth of Bitcoin. And that's the wealth transfer. The wealth transfer has nothing to do with status. The wealth is being transferred from the people who own real estate to the people who own Bitcoin. The people who own Bitcoin are silently taking wealth from everyone else. And that's just how the system works. If people
So I don't think they're taking it from anyone. I don't think they're taking it from anyone. And I do think that like being a homeowner is status. Like that person that is currently locked out of the down payment game, like the barrier to entry to get into real estate and the reason why real estate has status or whatever is because of the barrier to entry. So the fact
mm,
that Bitcoin is a life raft and is an available like investment to climb that wall of a down payment faster is incredible. Like that's incredible. And the like that message needs to be out there. Um that person experiencing that rise is not taking that wealth from anyone though. No. They're taking on risk, they're taking on volatility, and they're being paid for that volatility with increasing in status.
I think they are. I don't know. Maybe we're looking at this from different perspectives, but I think they are taking wealth from the other person, because wealth is being transferred from one person to another. When you own real estate, that the real estate value is going to decrease over time, and that's it's not just disappearing. It's being transferred to someone else who owns the better asset, which is appreciating in terms of real estate over time. So if, let's say, somebody, okay, let's look at an example. So in 2011, if you wanted to buy one house versus one Bitcoin, that one Bitcoin would be exactly the same value as one house. So 64,000, sorry, not one Bitcoin, 64,000 Bitcoin would have, it would have cost you 64,000 Bitcoin to buy a house. If you had held that Bitcoin, of course, you went through the volatility, you went through the risk. It was much more risky to own Bitcoin back then. You went through it. Maybe you studied it. I mean, not everybody's going to buy 64,000 Bitcoin. You're going to buy Bitcoin if you study it, if you understand what it is. Even today, people are not going to buy 0.21 Bitcoin until they actually figure out what it is. There are billionaires who don't even have 0.21 Bitcoin, right? And that comes from, again, that's a wealth transfer. That's a wealth transfer from the people who have the knowledge to the, sorry, from the people who don't have the knowledge to the people who do. At some point, that 0.21 Bitcoin is going to buy a house. Today, let's say you're buying a house today versus you're buying 0.21 Bitcoin. You're buying the house for hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're putting your time, energy, your resources, all of that into that house. What the person who's buying 0.21 Bitcoin is doing is they're buying all of that time, energy, and resources for $5,000 or for $17,000. The house will cost you $500,000 today, while the Bitcoin will cost you $17,000. But the person who buys the Bitcoin for $17,000 will be able to transfer it to someone else, and they'll be able to get that wealth away from them, that house from them, for $17,000 essentially for in their cost.
I think I don't think there's a finite amount of wealth in the world. I think wealth is constantly being created, and it's like the video, like the everything divided by 21 million video. Like your portion of the world's value is going to constantly be increasing relative to how much Bitcoin you have, because fiat money is no longer skimming off the top. And so, no, I don't think that someone experiencing rapid ascension of their wealth via Bitcoin is causing other people that garnered wealth from the legacy system to lose status.
Okay, but let's look at it this way. If you own stocks and you're getting 10% returns, and somebody else doesn't own stocks, they're owning cash, the US government prints more money, it goes to the people who own, who develop your who are behind your stocks. That's a wealth transfer. That's a transfer of wealth from people who don't own stocks to the people who do own stocks. If you own real estate, the property value of your real estate is going to keep going up because more and more fiat is being added to the system. That's a wealth transfer. It's a redistribution of wealth from people who own cash to the people who own real estate. The way that I see it, when there's more real estate being created, when more people are making real estate, they're redistributing wealth from people who own real estate today to those people who are creating the real estate today, to the people who are able to sell that real estate to somebody in the market. They're taking some value off the top of the real estate properties that exist today, and they're transferring that value to themselves. Instead of somebody, let's say, fighting for your property, let's say I develop more properties and I take demand from your property. That's a wealth transfer from you to me.
The population is expanding though. Like
Population is expanding, but it's not expanding enough, right? So
it's not expanding enough, but on a Bitcoin standard, right? It will. Like, I think that's where on a Bitcoin standard.
But that's where we come to the final. That's where we come to that. It's a wealth transfer from Bitcoin, or sorry, it's a wealth transfer from legacy assets to Bitcoin. The population isn't growing enough for prices to be increasing 7, 10, 15% a year. It's all determined at the margin. If more money didn't appear out of nowhere, then those prices wouldn't go up.
So, see,
Like
and
if
I
you
think
look,
this. Go ahead.
go ahead.
No, just I think that as So people that choose to stack Bitcoin today are experiencing an increase in savings and experiencing an increase in status and increasing experience in wealth. They're also increasing in their experience and increase in optimism of their status of the future, which leads to them having more fulfillment, having more happiness. Again, super generalizing, but more likely to create more kids. Very generalizing. They are experiencing that. The other person, the person that has status and optimism and is wealthy in the legacy world, this person experiencing that, like, I guess it just isn't. I feel like I keep repeating myself. Like that person, the person that has status and optimism and influence in the legacy system today is not experiencing a drop in anything because they already have it today. So they are not compelled to take on the risk or the opportunity or the whatever of Bitcoin because they just don't have a need for it. Like they don't have a need for it.
Yeah.
And so the world, like, they are not threatened by that. They think it's terrific. They're like, absolute, that's terrific. Yeah. That like new people are experiencing new ways to experience wealth in the way that I already experience wealth. Like I think that's why they're not motivated by any of our like sayings that we all have. And they're just not convinced by the political nature of a Bitcoin standard being better because, again, they're just so baked into the legacy world that like they don't even believe that's possible. They don't even believe that's possible. And so, but at some point, they will quote unquote get it. And a portion of their pie will begin to go into the other pie of Bitcoin, the Bitcoin economy. And then the Bitcoin economy becomes a rising tide that improves the overall net average of abundance in the entire world because we're stripping away the corruption like of fiat and no one has to lose.
But again, that's a transfer from the legacy system to Bitcoin. That's a transfer of wealth. If somebody in Nigeria, for example, was able to stack 1 Bitcoin today, if they put in the work, or not even 1 Bitcoin, 0.01 Bitcoin, today that 0.01 Bitcoin will not buy much. But at some point,
I don't think it's a transfer. I don't think it's a transfer. I think people are switching position. So you have the pie. The pie today is this big, and everyone is ranked 1 to 8 billion. Okay. Yeah. People that adopt Bitcoin sooner are experiencing rapid climbing up the ranking of the 8 billion people, right? But then as that same thing is happening, the pie is going like this as people's positions are changing. And so that person at spot 17 is never going to experience being below 17. They're always going to be at 17, and they're going to quote unquote adopt Bitcoin last, and they're going to stay at 17 as 16 Bitcoiners pass them to take that spot. Like,
but I don't. That's what I don't agree with. See, that's where I think we have that disconnect. Where if you so let's say you're 17th place, and there are a bunch of people who own Bitcoin. You're one of the last people to adopt Bitcoin. If you're one of the last people to adopt Bitcoin, that means that your stocks are going to be worth significantly less in terms of Bitcoin. So on a Bitcoin standard, you're not going to be 17th. You're going to be much, much, much lower. You're going to be like 1 billion, 2 billion, 5 billionth. Right? So that's the transfer. That's the wealth transfer. When you look at it from the US dollar lens, of course, everybody's just getting richer and richer and richer. Everybody's getting more and more rich no matter what, but their prosperity is decreasing, right? They're able to spend less, they're able to buy less, they're able to consume less. In terms of Bitcoin though, let's say you have a standing with fiat, then you have a standing with Bitcoin. So you may be number 17 today in terms of Bitcoin, but if you ignore Bitcoin, you're going to drop to 18, 19, 20, 21, 50, 100, 200, 500, right? That's what I mean by the wealth transfer. So the wealth transfer is from people who, I mean, this is a race that people don't even know that they're in.
Yeah. Okay.
They have no idea.
Okay. You're right. Perfectly laid out. Let me try again. You're right. and this analogy is helpful. Okay, so everyone's still ranked 1 to 8 billion. The pie is still like going like this. The fiat pie is still going like this because it's a bad measuring stick, right? And just even abundance, like abundance, wealth in the world is like increasing. But you're standing in line of the 1 to 8 billion. Okay, let's go. Instead of it being like, again, just specific, your specific spot is dropping. Your specific spot is moving, but let's go with some general like bands, okay? Just some bands of like ultra wealthy, like just I think that getting Bitcoin at the price you deserve means that that person in 17th place, the rationalization, the light bulb moment to transition a portion of their stuff to the Bitcoin economy will happen before they drop the band that they're in. So, yes, is the ratio of people that adopted Bitcoin early going to continue to crowd out the legacy people in that band? Yes. I don't think they're going to experience I think wealthy people in the fiat world are going to begin to switch into Bitcoin before they drop out of the band that they're in. And so the relative kind of like, because at that level, the difference between, from a lifestyle perspective, the difference between number 8 and number 17 and whatever is very like, not a lot, right? And so I guess like I don't think that people are going to like, because of the way that fiat money is going to expand, there's no one is going to like go down with the fiat ship.
But I don't know. I don't know if I agree. I don't know if I agree with that. I think the later the fact that you said that people aren't going to figure it out before they leave that band of wealth, let's say 10%.
Yeah.
Let's say you have 10% increments. You have top 10%, you have the next 10%, next. People are going to drop out of that band. I think people are going to, the top 10% are going to fall out of that top 10% if they wait long enough. Everybody in North America is probably part of the top 10%. And I think that's going to change, because I think what's going to happen is people in other parts of the world are going to accumulate that Bitcoin that could have gone to this person in North America, and they're going to build a better lifestyle where they are.
Okay. I don't think that Bitcoin, and this is great points. Again, I really like today. Like, I feel like today we really nailed it. And here's what it brings me full circle back to is, you know how I'm saying that like if we don't get the influencers, like adoption is going to be like, if there's a cap on adoption, I don't think that Bitcoin can become the world reserve currency with those people in the top 10% falling out of the 10%, I guess. Like, I think it is I think a prerequisite for Bitcoin becoming the world reserve currency is for those, I'm going to use the word gatekeeper, but in like a neutral sense, like for those people in the top 10% that have that much influence in the world, they're going to have to begin to DCA into Bitcoin before they drop out of the 10%. Because of how much influence they have in the world. And I think this is where, the people, the real estate investors that are like, the US government will never let Bitcoin like become the world, like that's what they're saying. Like, that's what they're saying is the influencers of the world, like the people with political power in the world will not, quote unquote, let this happen. Right. I don't, and yeah, like I that's why I think it is like a pseudo political game also, that like those people, that this is where the whole thing of like, oh, like, isn't it bad that the US government is stacking Bitcoin? Like, dang, like the mission's over. Like we the people, like the mission of power to the people and all this stuff is over because the US government is involved now, or because banks are involved now. Like, man, this sucks. Like, that's where I don't agree with any of that, because I'm just like, no, like, dude, it's the whole like, in order for Bitcoin to become the world reserve currency, like major stakeholders in the legacy way that the world work are going to have to defect.
I don't think so. I don't see that's where we disconnect. I think that's where we're not connecting. The majority of the world doesn't use the majority of the world doesn't have stocks and real estate available to them. 95% of the world, 90% of the whatever the percentage is. The majority of the world has no access to all of that. They don't have prime real estate. They don't have access to the stock market. So let's say for that situation to work. What we're assuming is that those are the only people that will have an influence on the world. I think there's going to be new people who have influence. Let's say, for example, people who are watching my content, people who are watching your content. Actually, people who are watching my content because you're a real estate investor. People who are watching my content. They don't care about real estate. They don't care about the real estate market. They're just buying Bitcoin, and they know for a fact that eventually the real estate investors who see real estate as the way to save are going to want Bitcoin. They're going to want their Bitcoin specifically. They're going to want that Bitcoin. So if they accumulate Bitcoin, what they're doing is they're increasing the purchasing power of Bitcoin. They're increasing the incentive to mine Bitcoin. They're making the Bitcoin network more powerful. So I think what my point here is that Bitcoin doesn't care about real estate investors. Bitcoin doesn't care about stock investors. That wealth is moving away regardless. If people own real estate, if people own stocks, at least the way that I see it, they're losing value in terms of Bitcoin, and there's no way to turn back. There's no way to go back to where we were before, and that's never going to happen. There's no way for even if the people who own real estate and stocks they don't like Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. It means nothing because Bitcoin's not impacted by that. Bitcoin's not looking for external validation. What Bitcoin's looking for is more and more people to adopt Bitcoin, to study Bitcoin, to use Bitcoin as a store of value.
By you saying though that eventually those people are going to want the Bitcoin, like that is the external value. Like in order for okay, so it's like easy early gains at the gym. Like when you first going and you're not in shape, you're gonna experience gains. Like you're gonna experience gains, but then you hit a plateau. And I think that people that have been stacking Bitcoin are going to hit Bitcoiners that stack in a vacuum without the like old world legacy world giving it validation is going to hit a ceiling of adoption like and because you won't be able to trade the Bitcoin for the stuff like you
You'll be able to
becoming
trade it with other
wealthy.
Bitcoiners, right? Like there are other
how
Bitcoiners,
do
especially
any
in Nigeria,
Bitcoiners
for
have any
example.
real estate though? Like what are you going to trade with them? We all sold all our chairs and don't own anything and never did anything. Like
Wait for
what do
what do
we
you mean?
have to trade?
But there's anybody can build houses. Bitcoiners can build houses. That's the point, right?
How are you going to build houses without influence in the world? Like you have to have
Why do you need
influence in the
influence?
world to acquire land and like understand permitting process and like from the
You
old
own
world.
Bitcoin. But that's the point. You own Bitcoin. You own Bitcoin. You use that. You convert that Bitcoin into whatever currency you want to, and you buy the land. Like
Yes.
while fiat currencies exist, while the legacy financial system exists, there are going to be people who are willing to buy Bitcoin for those fiat currencies, and you can use those fiat currencies to buy whatever land you want. You don't need influence. Like somebody doesn't need to own real estate in order to buy real estate. Somebody doesn't need to own land in order to buy land. They just need value. And it doesn't matter if the legacy system likes that value, if the legacy system values that asset that they have. It doesn't matter. There are other people who are willing to buy. Let's say if I wanted to buy a property, or if I wanted to buy some land and I wanted to develop it at some point, I'll be able to do that because there are going to be people who are willing to buy that Bitcoin from me. They're
And I
willing to.
think that I guess and at that moment you will be seen as more influential in the eyes of the legacy world than prior to making that purchase.
But I don't think they're going to care about me. I don't think the legacy world is going to care. I think the people who are in that legacy world, like you're one of those people who own Bitcoin and you own real estate.
Yeah.
There are people who only own real estate. They don't care about me. They don't care who I am. They're going to figure it out when they figure it out, and I don't think that they're needed in order to push Bitcoin forward. I think Bitcoin's going to be pushed forward regardless. I think their adoption is inevitable. Regardless of what happens, they're going to have to adopt Bitcoin because at some
I
point
think
they're going to see.
that correct. But if the end game is to stack Bitcoin so that you can buy land, so that you can build houses, because the current way of acquiring houses is whatever frustrating. There, Bitcoiners doing that is going, I know you don't care about their influence or whatever. You don't care what they think about you. That's going to be a byproduct of that. Like a byproduct of doing things in the physical world is that other people take note and have opinions, and they're going to see that. And then that is going to be that moment has more of a chance of quote unquote orange pilling that person than them just like listening to a non-real estate owning Bitcoiner talking about theory. Like they're going to watch that proof of work in the world and have like more respect for that position, which I think is cool.
I think it's cool as well, but I don't think it's relevant to Bitcoin's adoption. I don't think it's relevant to Bitcoin's growth. Anyways,
How would it not be? How would it not be? Because that person then buying Bitcoin would then increase the demand for Bitcoin. Like that's now one more person in the world that is now feeding into the demand for Bitcoin.
Bitcoin's demand is going to go up regardless. It doesn't matter if if that person does it today versus if they do it in 20 years. Bitcoin doesn't care. Bitcoin adopters don't care. Every single person that I know who understands Bitcoin is always going to want more. They always want more. They don't want less. Like they don't want.
See, I even compare that. Like I disagree with that part because I don't think it's not about wanting more Bitcoin. It's wanting more purchasing power. And as the purchasing power of the finite units of Bitcoin continues to increase, like I think there's a weird underlying scarcity mindset in there.
But they're just incentivized to give it away at some point, right? Okay, so what I meant here was people will want more Bitcoin until they can exchange it directly for goods and services. They can exchange it directly for the things that they want. At some point, maybe they won't be able to create that value. And we go back to what you were saying before. People continue to dollar cost average. At some point, that dollar cost averaging has really no impact on their stack, right? Because their stack has grown so much that their dollar cost average is so small that it doesn't make an impact on how much money they have. At that point, of course, there are going to be people who start spending their Bitcoin. There are going to be people who start giving away their Bitcoin for goods and services. And but that's the point of money. That's the way that money works. Money works by allowing you to buy the things that you want, and money is supposed to purchase.
Absolutely. And more Bitcoiners doing that is going to have more of an influence on other people because they can tangibly see that it has changed their life or changed their status. Whereas right now in like dark mode, Bitcoiners aren't talking about how Bitcoin is changing their life really.
Yeah.
Or they're not demonstrating it. Like they're not demonstrating it.
Okay, so what we'll do here is I think I feel like we both I learned a lot. I'm sure you learned a lot too, but I feel like that was a great conversation. What we'll do is we'll leave it to the comments. We'll leave it to the people who are listening to this, who listen to this. Give us your opinions. I feel like this is extremely valuable. Either way, I mean, I'm going to keep stacking Bitcoin. I know Brian's going to keep stacking Bitcoin. We're going to keep doing our thing. We're going to keep creating our content. I feel like the value of these conversations is that more people think differently. More people think about where things can go, where the world can go, and they just have a new opinion of how to do things. Brian, any last topics that you want to talk about? Any last comments there?
No, that's it. Like for real. Thanks for having me today. Go to search Brian Harrington on YouTube. I'm genuinely trying to push the needle on personal finance Bitcoin content for 25 to 55-year-olds like in North America, people that have just like regular W2 jobs, people that have families, people that live in the suburbs, like people that really want to know how Bitcoin can incorporate with their personal finances. No, today felt like genuinely refreshing. And I feel like it's pushing, I think it's like pushing the needle. And so I'm going to read the comments. Definitely want to hear like what people say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brian. Really appreciate your time here. I hope everybody had fun listening to this conversation. I thought this was extremely valuable. For me, it was very stimulating. I learned a lot. I thought a lot. It gave me a different way to look at things. So awesome.
Love it. See you later.